Good evening. Happy Tuesday, September 5th. Good evening. Happy Tuesday. I'm calling this meeting of Charlotte City Council to order Tuesday in honor of Labor Day, the Labor Day holiday, which I hope everybody enjoyed. I'd love to thank and remember the legacy of our workers in America and everything that they've done to contribute to our society. But we are here at our first meeting of the month's strategy session. And just for those that are out there watching, just a reminder that there are two kind of purposes for our first month of the meeting strategy session. One is specific. It's an opportunity for our committee chairs to come and present to the council as a whole. We've had a day of committee meetings where we've discussed policy work that we have going on and other work that we're doing with city staff and the community at large. But the second purpose of our first Monday meetings is, again, that strategy session where us on council can have any type of more formal or informal conversations about work, about expectations, about deliverables we might want staff to work on. Again, that's not necessarily, that's a more general conversation, and that's at the prerogative of the council. So we'll dive right into those things after we start with introductions, and we can start to my left with our city attorney.
Good evening, Lena James, Deputy City Attorney.
Victoria Wallington, District 3.
Tari Picard, District 6.
Ed Driggs, District 7.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
Braxton Winston, Mayor Pro Tem.
Lawana Slack Mayfield, Council Member at Large.
Good evening, Marjorie Molina. I represent District 5.
Ariel Smith, Lead City Clerk.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll start by just going down the line with our committee heads, chairs and vice chairs. I don't know if every chair is here. They are? All right. Vice, okay.
I can do ED if the chairman is not online.
Okay, do you want to go ahead and just get us started by doing a transportation and transportation plan and then go right into economic development?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Driggs.
So we had, the Transportation Planning and Development Committee had a very productive meeting this morning. I will just give you a very high-level overview, a CATS update where I think each of you has a copy of the actual document that we use to track our progress on the issues that were identified related to cats and shows what remediation is taking place. I will summarize by saying that we have now either solved or have planned the solution for all the items on that list. So some of the inspections that needed to be done have taken place. The maintenance that needs to be done is scheduled. I don't believe there are any issues related to the disclosures that we had in the last year that are not being addressed. But what we are also doing is through the joint committee with MTC, we're now starting to look ahead, and Mr. Bakari has provided a very valuable kind of framework for risk assessment so that not only are we dealing with the problems that we identified, but we are also now anticipating problems that could occur or that we might not have identified yet and planning to respond to those. So I think on cats we're in a good place. Don't know if any other committee members here wants to comment. And then we had a planning update, and we were told about some text amendments that staff is working on, generally of a technical nature. So the staff has identified two different types of text amendment. One is what they call technical, and that has a certain process for the amendment to be brought forward and finally approved by council. So all these amendments will be subject to council approval. The technical ones are really clarifications or in order to avoid unintended consequences, and therefore not expected to be too controversial. But they also have a policy type of text amendment that they consider, and for that there is a much more robust process of involvement of the UDO Advisory Committee and community outreach before any changes are made. So there were no action items for the committee today. We simply had that information. What I thought was really interesting was a conversation we had with Dennis Lacaria of CMS about CMS's process for identifying the needs for schools and how they do their capital plan. And this is relevant to us because we're constantly being challenged on the impact on schools of our land use decisions. And I think if we understand better how CMS works, it will help to inform us in our decision-making and in our responses to constituents who ask us. We get challenged on questions like, where do the estimates on the number of students come from? He provided good information on that. He also talked about the $2.5 billion bond offering that is on the agenda for this current November. It's a referendum, and what the projects are. I thought that conversation was so useful that I would like to have Mr. Lacaria come and talk to us, to the full council, and let everybody hear the information that he shared and have an opportunity also to ask him questions. We did recognize that trying to solve a lot of the issues about CMS and our land use decisions should not be resolved in the context of petitions and our decisions. There really needs to be a way to harmonize our policies with the school policies on a higher level, a more general level. And Ms. Craig pointed out that a lot of those conversations do take place. They did take place during the UDO process. They are taking place. But I think maybe what is needed is for council to get a better understanding of how that works and maybe to weigh in a little more based on our input from our constituents on whether or not, for example, approving a very large residential development near a school that's already overcrowded is a good idea. So I think I'll leave it at that because I do want to try, if it's Mr. Manager, to get him to come and talk on one of our sessions to the whole council and let everybody hear it and offer their comments. So, Mayor Pro Tem, that's what I have.
I'll just comment on that real quick to build on what Mr. Driggs was saying to Mr. Jones. One, I think, to put it plainly, the information that we get on our petitions is very objective. And to be completely honest, a lot of council members we've learned today, have been referencing the numbers that we get in an incorrect fashion. For instance, when we talk about percentage of school capacity, actually doesn't reference the students. It has more to do
Yes.
with teachers and classrooms. And so, to that point, what we did accomplish today, I think staff was provided information that allows a better answer, I guess, to be given to council members when certain questions are asked, not all questions. But I think we think that there's a real kind of reference there from us, all things being equal right now, for us to kind of understand better the information that we're dealing with. So I think it's a twofold. I think there's a public conversation, a council conversation, but also a kind of back of the house staff conversation. And just to let council members know, sorry, just to reference the first part of your presentation
Yes.
around CATS, staff has, at the request of Mr. Mitchell, provided copies of CATS's progress report of identified actions, oversight and remediation, just to let everybody know.
And if I may, I just want to mention the members of the committee are myself, Ms. Anderson, Mr. Graham, Ms. Johnson, and Mr. Mitchell. And to your point, I think when we got information back, they said, you're going to have so-and-so many students, right, based on the residential development you're talking about. And then they said the school is at X% capacity. So it was kind of natural to assume that that information was related. But in fact, what was explained to us was they measure the capacity in terms of utilization of the classrooms based on the teachers they have and their ability to schedule those classrooms. So in fact, depending on whether it's an elementary school or a middle school or a high school, the benchmark for a total maximum utilization actually varies. And this was some of the stuff that I thought would be very interesting to have, because if you see a number like 130%, and your constituents are saying, why would you approve more resident? Just to enable to be able to explain that number properly would be valuable. So really want to follow up on that. But that's my report, sir. Yes.
Ms. Molina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. And actually, Mr. Chairman, I'm very interested. Mr. Manager, how do we plug in? Like, can we plug in? I'm interested in, like, I guess, what type of cohesion can we have? It'd be great for them to present, but then what's next? How do we kind of, I guess, bridge that gap where we can incorporate their information into our decision making? Is that a true possibility? Can we?
And I may have to phone a friend, Liz Babson. So what we're actually doing as a part of the infrastructure is, I believe it's 3 parts. And we're in part 2 right now, looking at 5 areas. One of those areas were schools, and we can maybe bump that up to the front.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very interested in, Mr. Chairman, I actually, as a mom of CMS kids right now, who, you know, I listen to parents all day long who come forward with different, you know, topics of concern, you know, parents, male and female, who have to deal with the, you know, the challenges, you know, and specifically in District 1, we have more Title I schools, from how I'm aware, than any other district in the city. So, you know, overcrowding is just an existential problem on top of what we're talking about. So I really want to lean into that conversation as much as possible. I just want to make that comment and say that.
The only thing I would add, though, is there are 3 elected bodies that oversee or fund the schools, right? You've got the legislature, the Board of County Commissioners, and the school board. So we need to harmonize with CMS and not offer ourselves as a 4th instance for school policy or even funding. On occasion, I've been asked why the city doesn't help with funding shortfalls. And it really wouldn't serve anybody for us to even take an action like restrict the size of a development based on the capacity of the school and thereby indirectly involve ourselves. We need to allow the growth of the city to proceed, and we need to soften the impacts perhaps, but we can't make our land use decisions based on school capacity. The schools have to adapt to the growth. Thank you.
Any more questions for TAP before Mr. Driggs moves on to economic development? Any more questions? If you're ready.
Like, oh, I got 2.
So, in the absence because the chair was remote today and I don't believe is on this call, I kind of presided over the meeting in the room. And we had 3 topics. Again, I'll mention that those committee members are The chair is Mr. Graham. I'm the vice chair, Ms. Ajmira, Ms. Molina, and Ms. Watlington. We had 3 topics today. One of them was a small business update. And I must say, the enthusiasm and the energy of the people on staff that talked to us about their activity in the small business space was really something to see. They described a lot of the programs that are going on, particularly in the corridors, in order to remove obstacles to people who are in small business situations. Maybe they need training, they have access to funding questions, and we actually have 5 programs that we sponsor or support one way or another that are intended to assist people in those circumstances. I think what was impressive was that within our economic development effort, there is a multifaceted effort ongoing to assist minority, but not only minority, small businesses in order to help them to grow, recognizing what a critical source they are of growth in the city, economic growth in the city, and employment. So I think I would just stay at that high level rather than try to get into more detail, but if a member of the committee wants to comment, please do. Okay, second item was the Corridors of Opportunity update. And here again, we were told there had been $72 million of investment in the Corridors of Opportunity over the span of a couple of years and a couple of bond cycles. And the efforts are on several different fronts, but it does have with sort of cleaning things up, improvements in the area, and I think if you generalize, making them more livable. So we heard a lot about different projects. There are 6 corridors, and we were told a little bit about what's happening individually in the corridors. Some of them are more advanced in terms of the work that's being done than others, but we're moving on all of them. And I think those were my main takeaways. I don't know whether somebody on the committee or Mr. Manager, is there anything I left out from the committee?
No, Mr. Driggs. One thing I would say is that it's something that we've been trying to build as an organization, to have this horizontal look at addressing issues in the community. And I believe you'll see much more of that as we build this organization.
Right. Okay. Yes, go ahead. I mean, sorry, Mr. Chair, it's your call. I'm still in committee mode here.
I just wanted to, I sat in on this meeting, and I'm not a member of the committee, but I really do want to just put a spotlight on all the work that's been going on in the Sugar Creek corridor. And I think what I know for a fact is talking to constituents that live along that corridor, it's real for them. They can see the changes. It's no longer something that's just ethereal that we're talking about or we're planning in this long runway. They can see the impacts of the corridor, and they're excited about that, and they want to see more. And so I just want to thank the corridors team for the multi-pronged approach that they have been executing in that space. And I think the other thing that's really important is, we as a city have invested in that corridor, but from a public-private investment, there's been an additional $22 million invested in that corridor. That did not come out of our pocket, but our initial investment stimulated additional investments in the corridor, and I hope that we'll see the same occur in other corridors as we begin to execute on their individual playbooks.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, and we'll talk about this on September 11th, but the corridor work is great. It's wonderful. It really is. I don't mean that facetiously. We're deep into implementation, and I'm excited to see that all around the city. As we're doing this work, our community partners are really starting to, or not starting, but they continue to engage, and they've started to reach out to talk about, hey, how do we elevate some of the things that we see across corridors into a real policy discussion? And so that's one of the things that I've requested, and I know staff is looking into how do we create the right connections within the processes to begin to have those discussions, because there are some things that are the same across the corridors that we can address from a policy standpoint in the city, but then there are other things that are more within the state or the federal authority, but we'd like to create an opportunity to advocate through our legislative agenda for some of those things, because it's not just about the places, of course, we know it's about the people, and so we want to make sure that as we improve the place, we don't make it so, we don't accelerate displacement by not also empowering the people to grow with the investment there. So I look forward to more of that discussion as we have the next corridors conversation. Does that make sense?
So thank you for saying that, Councilmember Watlington. I am going to surprise Councilmember Mayfield right now because, you know, one of the things that we did a long time ago was the West Boulevard Playbook, and the whole concept was, why do we have all these plans, they sit on the shelf for 20 years and we don't implement? I love the conversation that's happening. Channel Tracy a little bit, you know, it's not one size fits all for the corridors. They have their uniqueness. This was by design to have the public sector step in, but leverage the private sector dollars. So it's really working well. I do want to follow up on your request, Ms. Wallington, because I think there's a great opportunity for us to have these areas that for decades have not had the same level of, let's say, growth and some of the great things that happen through the city, but not at the expense of the people that are living there now, right? So that's why we have to be cognizant for those folks who want to remain in these areas that we're putting this investment in can.
What a great segue.
Any other comments, questions? Ms. Molina.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I had a thought while I was driving really fast in my car. I was not driving fast. No.
Oh, you can see the trees whizzing by.
Yes, so I was talking to Councilmember Driggs, and he was like, Marjorie, I could see like just the trees going by, you know, because I'm in like car rider mom mode, and you know, all you could see on my, I didn't realize the camera was positioned like that, so you could just see the trees.
That was a heritage tree.
Yeah, I don't know, like just driving past them. But I got this thought that I would like to offer to you, my colleagues, to really think about. You know, I think we're really planting some good roots in some ideas that I feel like we need to position to be a mission for what we intend to deliver going forward. No matter who is in these seats, no matter who is serving, you know, now, you know, as a body, we've made the decision to bring on Danielle Frazier. I think that was a great move. You know, that's something that we've executed as a body to say we're ready to get serious about jobs in the city, right? And we have all of these deliverables that are coming out of the economic development, you know, department that are adjacent to that. And so, and you know, what my fear is, you know, I listen, you know, coming on, especially as a new member, and listening to some of our council members, particularly my council member here, my colleague, Ms. Mayfield, and she would say, I remember we started X, Y, and Z, and then it just disappeared, right? And so that kind of thing just sticks in the back of my mind to say, when we all walk away from this, right, with the roots and the minds that we have at the table and what we bring forth to execute, how can we take that and actually make it something that's a true deliverable, a policy that becomes a part of what, you know, the city intends to carry out, no matter who's in the seat, you know, and how do we then, you know, create swim lanes, for an example. I know in a digital mind, this is like an ERP system, right? And I'm making swim lanes of, you know, talking about, you know, which departments discuss what, you know, all the way out to procurement, right? And that's a dream I know we're working on. I won't talk about that right now and belabor that point. But in the same vein, you know, kind of this inextricable nature of our work, how do we then tie these things in to make sure that once we all leave, once we're all done with these seats, we've left something that is tangible for someone else to come and continue that work and move forward. So, you know, I think I know this program that she's talked about, and I work with John Autry. He's literally my political mentor, who was like alongside her. But this CLT, what is it? The TLC by CLT. I know that program, and I wasn't even serving with her because she has really placed an emphasis on the work that was done during that time, but then she continues to make the emphasis that a lot of that work has somehow not been continued. So I think the mission, and like I said, I offer this to you all as my colleagues, I'd like for us to think in that framework, right? Like in the framework of permanence, in our work and how we deliver something that is going to be tangible, that who comes behind us, they have the mission to continue and then further develop, right? We're not telling them what to do, but of course, these are specific ideas that are going to allow outcomes for our residents, right? Jobs are something that we're never not going to need, right? Assets for small businesses, that's something that we're never not going to need. So how can we look at that from a permanence perspective? And it's ingrained into what we do and how we operate as a city. That's what I'm interested in.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Man, this is a good night. So it's kind of interesting. The team, last week, we were talking about some of the city's council's priorities and really what does affordable housing mean. So is there an opportunity at the next annual strategy meeting to really start to think about how are some of these priorities more action-oriented as opposed to just themes? So we're ready to rock and roll. Okay.
I'm with it. Like, yeah, I think it's, yeah. With it. Like,
Next time you see Representative Autry, would you tell him I miss the sour balls he used to hand me during council meetings? He had like 12 or 15 of them in the bottom of his case, and he'd reach in and he'd give me a couple, and I think he wanted me to put it in my mouth and have my cheeks stick out like this. But anyway, miss the guy.
I'm going to text him when I leave.
So the third item at the Economic Development meeting was Hire, an update on Hire Charlotte by Danielle Frazier, who has been on the job for about a month, I think, in her capacity spearheading our workforce development effort. Great to hear from her. I was hoping she'd be here tonight, but she probably knew that we wouldn't be here tonight. So anyway, she will present to the full council. But as you know, Danielle comes with a lot of experience in this space, and she's hit the ground running. What she was specifically reporting on today was the allocation of ARPA funds that the council had already designated for workforce development. She talked about the funding objectives that we had already established, and then some funding recommendations. And they were shared with us for information purposes. And I'll tell you just at a high level, workforce development services, $5 million, target industry training, about $1.5 million, talent connector, $1 million. I think the talent connector is what we used to call the portal. And I was told that that we had reacted so badly to the portal that it no longer had that name. And the essential skills curriculum for $1 million, and then renew skilled training and energy training, $500,000, and BankWorks financial services training, $100,000. So that was the proposed breakdown. I'm sure we'll have a chance on full council to look at that. But good report from her. Very excited to have Danielle. And I think the last thing I'll mention, Mayor Pro Tem, is there was just a huge amount of energy coming out of economic development in our meeting today. And I would like to commend in particular Ms. Dodson for her leadership in all of that. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mayor Pro Tem, can I make a comment, please? Again, I sat in on this committee. It was really a really good readout today. But I'm excited about Danielle joining us because it feels like over the last several months, we've been talking about workforce development as a catch-all phrase. And depending on who's in the room and, where the sun is in the sky, it can mean one of 50 different things. And so what I'm looking forward to, and she and staff sort of laid out the framework for what they're going to go and do and come back, is a detailed approach that is multi-pronged, that's intentional, that underscores collaboration, so that we're talking about workforce development in a very specific, multidimensional way, and not in a way where it's just in the ragu, right? It's like, oh yeah, that's workforce development. Well, not really, right? And so I'm looking forward to that, and I think we will be more intentional as we step into the new calendar year and of course the new fiscal year around how we can exercise on that, right? Just an overall observation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's everything on economic development. We'll move on to Ms. Ashmira, the Budget, Governance, Intergovernmental Relations Committees readout.
Thank you, Mr. Winston. So first, let me recognize the Budget, Governance, and Intergovernmental Relations Committee members, starting with Vice Chair Mr. Mitchell, who's not here with us, Ms. Anderson, Mr. Bukhari, and Ms. Mayfield. We had 2 items on our agenda today, starting with the fiscal year 2023 internal audit report and fiscal year 2024 plan. I saw our award-winning internal audit team led by Tina Adams. She gave us an update on the current work, and she also walked us through the review for 2024 plan. So there were audits that were issued have been around convention center, general services, aviation, user fees. And then there are remaining audits for fiscal year 2023, and that includes stormwater, housing and neighborhood services, general services, CDOT. The committee also reviewed the fiscal year 2024 and 2025 audit plan. And as a reminder, all the audits can be viewed by the public on city's website under Internal Audits Department page. So after review and discussion, Ms. Anderson had raised this item where this was something that was already identified by internal audit. That was CAT's maintenance review, a light rail, to be specific, CAT's light rail maintenance review. And I agreed along with Councilmember Mayfield, who were, so we had 3 council members today in attendance. So we unanimously voted for internal audit to move up this audit, specifically for CAT's light rail maintenance. So the audit team is going to work on the initial scope and timeline plan, and this will be conducted after the FDA review has been concluded. Obviously, since Ms. Anderson does serve as the Vice Chair of the Transportation Committee, we did offer Ms. Adams and her team to seek her insight and Mr. Drake's insight as they develop scope and timeline, so that will be part of our follow-up report. I think this will be critical as we work to restore public trust in CATS. I did review the progress report by the CATS. This is really good. Thanks to Mr. Cagle for his leadership. I think this is what we absolutely need as we see more issues with CATS, because this truly helps us build confidence in our system and ensure transparency. So I'm proud of the work that committee has done. And certainly this brings me back to my earlier work as an auditor in public accounting. That was almost a decade ago. But certainly this is something that is a sexy topic for me. But on the second item that we have, that's update on implementation of CEDC recommendation, and that might be more glamorous for Mr. Winston, because I remember when I served on the engagement EEE committee, the engagement, equity, and the environment committee last year, along with Mr. Winston. I know he really led this discussion on having some sort of really implementation on how do we make this engagement process more centralized, and how can we make it more transparent. So we have recommendations from the Equitable Development Commission that we were provided an update on that from our budget staff, and I will let Ms. Mayfield talk through on that one, because she was the one who led the discussion on that. So Ms. Mayfield, if you can just give us an update on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mayor Pro Tem, for the Charter Equitable Development Committee, Sherry Smith from Strategy and Budget updated us with the progress that staff is making towards our implementation and the recommendations that we received from the CEDC Commission back in April. As a reminder, the recommendations included to develop a more robust communication plan to let the members of the public know of the current data and tools available to them such as the CIP dashboard and more recently, the development of the Near Me app, and to build a more structured approach for community engagement by developing an internal community engagement SOP to be used across the city departments. As well as the committee noted that the city does not have a lot of information and useful tools that the community is fully aware of, and the community feedback included a request for training. That was one of the things that I asked for as well, on how to use the CIP dashboard and how to properly and accurately utilize the Near Me app to make it more user-friendly. The committee also noted the importance of transparency with the community on the onset of engagement. They gave us examples of 5 boxes, which one of the boxes would be utilized for that particular engagement versus the idea of appearance that all 5 of these boxes are going to be utilized since we are doing it in partnership. We also want to make sure that we ensure on the front end that the public understand the type of participation that is being sought. For example, is the city informing them of issues and or development and what their feedback will be specifically used for? How are we going to utilize their feedback? We're glad to see the work of the commission coming to fruition and their input helping to strengthen the city's approach to communication and engagement for our infrastructure projects. In addition to these initial recommendations, the CDC is meeting monthly and plans to present additional recommendations in our upcoming months. And that is all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ashmera and Ms. Mayfield. Any other questions, comments before we move on to Ms. Watlington's report?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. In the Housing, Safety, and Community Committee, we discussed 3 things. The first one was, the nest. I was there, I promise. The first item was the NEST committee recommendations for anti-displacement. We've been working for the last 1.5 years on that, right? So they came today with 9 programmatic inputs. And this one is an interesting topic, and it'll be good. We voted out a committee to talk about it full council. And what's interesting about it in particular is that we've got this one-time funding, that's ARPA funding, and we've got these ideas. We also have this point-in-time anti-displacement map. What are the areas that are right now vulnerable to displacement? So the question becomes, how do we best spend the money that we have allocated? But then from a broader sense, how do we create policy around when we invest in these particular areas, right? So that was part of the discussion that we hope to continue. Another component of it was we're very focused right now on this anti-displacement. That is what NEST was commissioned to do. That, however, is a part of the broader strategy to how do we reach people and achieve economic mobility in our city for our residents, right? So this speaks to a very specific group of folks. There are a number of recommendations that we will go over in more detail with the council. And I imagine there'll probably be some conversation around what is the biggest bang for our buck and those kinds of things. One thing that did stand out out of the conglomeration of new and existing programs is this idea that we create some kind of anti-displacement fund. One thing that I think could lend itself well to that is creating a policy around when we make public investment that we know impacts displacement, like transit, for instance. How do we set up a policy such that we've got the supporting funds that we need to enable residents to stay in place, particularly in fast-growing areas where we know we're making an investment in. So that's the first item, more to come on that. The second item was around the CRC. So at the beginning of the year, we talked about council looking at our boards and commissions to just do a tune-up. And we requested that the CRC come back because that was one that has received a lot of attention, particularly because of its turnover over the last several years. And so today we were given an update by the CRC staff about the makeup of the committee, its new chair, and the thinking around the subcommittees and the nature of the work, CRC Community Relations Committee. And what that will look like, what I've requested, because it seemed like the committee still had more questions regarding what exactly is the CRC doing that's separate and apart from our community relations staff. And we'd like to make sure that we're matching the resources to the tasks at hand. So there are some things that we are coming to understand, and they're going to provide back to us that the law creates a space for the CRC committee, like with fair housing disputes and appeals and things of that nature. And then there's other work that has been done in the past by the CRC that I'm sure Councilman Mayfield can speak to in regards to like advocacy from a legal standpoint, the MLK parade planning and things of that nature. So we really just need to understand what is the work of the committee and how do we really best staff that, not staff it, excuse me, resource it. Is 45 the right number, or is there something else that we need to do? Do we need to look at who's on the committee or what specific skill sets we might need to make sure that that committee is as valuable to us as possible? So we hope to get a report back on that in the coming months. The next thing that we talked about was something that I hope that all of you will get behind. It's very near and dear to my heart, and I know is near and dear to my council members' heart, is that we passed through committee to come to full council for consideration a $1.5 million investment. It's a release of a previous earmark for the Three Sisters Market in support of their capital campaign, which they are well on their way to achieve in order to build the Three Sisters Market co-op structure. That is the recap of the meeting, and I will open it up to my vice chair or other committee members who wanted to add.
I wanted to, real quick, just touch base on the first report that you made about the Neighborhood Equity Stabilization, or NESS, Commission's presentation. Just again, for those of folks that are out there watching, this commission was created during the comprehensive plan process. It was a way of having the community vet certain policy recommendations, policies, tactics, strategies that the council and staff and our community at large could employ that would actually lead to be anti-displacement strategies. They presented their report, and I think there was agreement amongst the committee discussion that there needs to be a handoff of the work, both short and long term, or some may argue that already has been handed off since the NESS proposal was presented. But that now that we do have some strategies, tools that have been vetted by the community, that these might be able to create an anti-displacement effects, now it's time for council and staff to work together, not just in future fiscal year decision making, but is there opportunity to do it now? In certain conditions. So I think that's something that staff and council is going to have to figure out the best way to go about doing that in short and long term. Ms. Mayfield.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you, Madam Chair, and for bring some requests to us now. We don't need to wait till fiscal year 2024 to 2025, because there are some opportunities right now that we might be able to address in that breakout of 8 items, especially in the top 5 items from NESS, because we're doing quite a bit of it. This gives us the opportunity to put the synergy when we look at the corridors, when we look at what's happening along Sugar Creek, when we look at the investments, when we look at the workforce, putting all of that together and helping to create that outline of what our expectation is, going back to Councilmember Molina's comments earlier of what does that long range impact look like outside of all the years of study. Now's the time to put these pieces of this puzzle together and start creating that first corner. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions from the council? Well, that was the last of our report outs. Again, this is the opportunity for council to have informal or formal conversations with each other about anything that we have coming down the pike. If we want to talk to staff, give them any type of guidance of information that we may need for the month of September or the next few months, this is opportunity. But We also have the Mayfield.
My mic went on when I made that motion, so that one didn't count. For Manager Jones, I think we have some updates from previous conversations after you presented manager's report, when we asked to have a couple of things, some updates brought back to us. What I can't remember if any of those should have been referred to committee, because I know we have a couple of things that's been floating out there that I'm hoping we can get into the appropriate committees so that we can start having some discussions in this term, so as not to be rolling it over for whatever future council comes in, so that we can try to address as much as possible while we are all together and we're all a part of the conversations.
Thank you, Councilmember Mayfield. So we didn't have a chance last week to go over the status report that I had at the dais, but I'll make sure that I get that back to you. And really, it's pretty neat what's happened by each one of your priority areas and the work that's happened in the committees. But I will check with Julia to look at the tracking of where the referrals are, where they are in committee. And because you said that, I do want to say I think there's a great opportunity for us when we start to think about the work that you've done around the Jobs and Housing Summit and the work that's gone around mobility, and we've talked about that three-legged stool, that we can start to, I guess, take a different look at how we measure what success is like. There are going to be some things that come to you in September, and you're going to see, some pressures on the dollars that are related to the Housing Trust Fund. So as we start to think about the next 30 days and some of the decisions that will be made, are those things that make sense, those things that are horizontal in nature that we can think about, good paying jobs, we can think about mobility, we can think about housing. I think with that lens, with this council in this term, I think there's some opportunity there.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I want to lift up something really quick, because actually it means a lot. You guys have seen a lot of my constituency lately. But actually, I got a message from one of my constituents that I represent while we were in the meeting, and I didn't even realize it. But there was really, and actually she got in her car and drove down here.
Maureen is.
Yeah, so Ms. Jalewski actually serves on plenty of our boards, and she serves in many capacities, but she had a question specifically related to the corridors of opportunity. And as we continue to roll out some of those strategies around, how we intend to realize what the corridors look like specifically right now, I guess there's some additional concern around the Albemarle Road corridors, like best practices, what we're learning. So what I'd like to put out as a deliverable is actually if there's anything that we have that is showing like what we're learning along the way from the corridors and how we intend to take those forward as we continue to implement along the corridors, that'd be great. That'd be a way that I can actually disseminate that information to, the residents, particularly in East Charlotte, to kind of give that reassurance that not only are we, like we got Sugar Creek. Sugar Creek is, everyone that we do, it's my estimation that it's more or less like a test case, right? We're learning as we go. This is not something that we've done before. This is all brand new, right? But then best practices says, as we go along, we learn what that looks like. We learn what's working. We learn what's not. We monitor and control, our baseline based on, what we see, what needs to be implemented. So I don't know if we have any like tangible information or even something that's a one-pager, that as we go along, we would be able to disseminate. I guess I'm putting that out there as a request.
Before I give it to Mr. Jones, I will just say I think that's going to be part of the discussion or the presentation that we have next week, because during the committee there were several different slides that related to kind of just that. I wouldn't call them best practices, right? Because part of it is we're writing some of the things. This is sort of an experiment and laboratory, but certainly part of the discussion today was going over some of those highlights of things that we've learned, how we're built, how we may have entered into this and we've learned and changed and adjusted. So it's certainly in the deck. I believe it'll be part of that discussion, but I just wanted to give that.
Yeah, so in this very room, next Monday, Monica, who gave a I guess, a condensed version of what's happening with the corridors today at the ED meeting. We'll talk in more depth about corridors during the action briefing next week.
That would be great.
Yeah.
That'll help a lot. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Thank you.
Including those some specific corridor-specific examples of that, not just in a general sense. 'Cause
Okay.
I know you specifically called out Albemarle Road.
Alma Road, yeah.
Ms. Edgemere.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, so Monica did a great job collaborating with other organizations that work in corridors. I mean, she listed out a lot of organizations across the city that her group has been working with that work in this corridor space. So it would be great for her to directly connect with the Charlotte East and make sure that the Charlotte East team has been involved, because they have been, I mean, Maureen has been doing this work for as long as I remember. So it would be great to have their team involved as you build a plan and implementation for the corridor. I know you all are working with the Latin American Coalition. That is great. And some of the small businesses there. The Charlotte East has a broader reach that will include a lot of neighborhoods, business community. So it'd be great. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Say aye. That's unanimous. Thank you all.